Welcome back to Women in Westminster, where we explore the human stories behind the headlines. I'm your host, Eleni, and today I'm speaking with Baroness Lola of Hornsey, who was appointed to the House of Lords in 2004 and is a crossbench life peer. I know from other interviews I've conducted that it can be slightly awkward when someone is talking about your achievements, but Lola, you really deserve it. You were one of the first black women to be appointed to the Lords, and you're a trailblazer for causes such as ethical fashion, gender equality, and the prevention of modern slavery. You've also been the Chancellor of the University of Nottingham for the last 4 years, and you're the first member of the House of Lords that I've actually spoken to on this podcast. So it's great to be here speaking with you today.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I feel really honoured.
It's an honour for me as well. But as I said a minute ago, you were one of the first black women to be appointed to the House of Lords. So how did you navigate misogyny and racism on your journey? And would you say that attitudes have changed since you were appointed in 2004?
Well, it's interesting you put it like that because you're assuming that there's misogyny and racism, but you'd be kind of right in your assumption. So, I mean, for me, as somebody who's worked in the academic world prior to being in the House of Lords, I was, a professor of cultural studies and all of these kinds of things. So I was used to walking into rooms that were full of basically white males and a few sort of scattered white women. But the House of Lords was something else because obviously there were faces and names that I recognised. So, but I think, I can think of several incidents where people used highly inappropriate language.
I'm sorry to hear that.
But kind of in a way, I was kind of expecting it, a bit like you, I would assume that it would be there and I'd be lucky if I didn't fall prey to that. But I guess I sort of feel that, how can I put it? I don't want to normalise it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I kind of know what you mean. You were expecting it and it does exist, but at the same time it's not okay that it exists.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Very well put. So absolutely that. And so one of the things I did was to start to keep a note of some of the worst comments and things that happened.
And report it?
No, because we're such an odd setup here. So it's not like having a normal job where I would go to the human resources or line manager and say so-and-so said this, and also, this term microaggressions. Some of them are kind of like, you think, is it worth saying anything about this? And this is my interpretation.
Because people might not realise that they're making sort of certain comments that could be perceived in that way.
Yeah, it's partly that, and some of them, without wishing to appear ageist, some of the people were quite elderly where some of the language that they would have used
would have been okay in a different time.
Yeah.
I get that.
Not so much okay, but accepted.
Yes.
Kind of not challenged, perhaps. But I think you asked the question about how I navigated that situation. Basically, talking to other peers who were black and brown and, from different parts of the world, and particularly women, and sharing experiences with them, so that then it makes it easier to depersonalize it. So it's not about you as an individual that, this other person has made this remark or somebody's let the door slam in your face or whatever. It's about a wider context than that. And so we would exchange stories. And also, I would say, with some of my fellow peers with disabilities, because they could tell me some similar incidents that had happened to them. So it's not to say I was pleased about that, obviously.
Well, yeah, obviously, but at least there's sort of other people with similar struggles. So even though it's not acceptable, at least it's not just you. It's a group of people. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so what do you find most rewarding about your job, and what keeps you motivated when it's difficult to find support for a cause?
That's such a good question, and it's so relevant right now. What motivates me, it's because I sort of see things happening in the wider world, and I think, well, I'm now in a position where I can do something about some of those things. You mentioned modern slavery earlier. I didn't even know that existed, along with a lot of other people about 20 years ago, but now sadly, we're much more aware of that. But recently I've been working on a private members bill. I don't know if you're aware of that or whether I need to explain that. a little bit. But just to say that's essentially, if you're not in government, you can produce a piece of legislation and ask the government to take it on. So it's a way of making a law that the government hasn't really thought of or supported in the past. And I was sad to see the opportunity to push that forward go because the general election.
Yes.
And so when there's a general election called, everything comes to a halt, business stops, and including my private member's bill. So I was feeling a little bit down about that, I have to confess. And then, just last night, we had a meeting which I'd planned before.
Right.
And I looked at all the people sitting around the table, and this bill is about, the legislation would be about calling commercial organisations and public authorities to account for whatever goes on in their supply chains that causes human rights abuses or environmental harms. So it's quite a wide-ranging bill, or would have been quite a wide-ranging bill. But I was so pleased to see
that it's getting traction again after the election.
Exactly, and that there was and this was just a proportion of the people that would be affected. So it's specifically targeted at people responsible for procurement. Now, I don't know if you know anything about that. Most people don't.
I don't know much about that.
No. Well, listen, I'm not going to make you fall asleep by telling you the ins and outs of it. But essentially, what it means, if you work in the London borough of whatever, or like I live in the London borough of Haringey, and let's say the people who are responsible for keeping the streets clean would be a commercial company, so that the council has to procure their services. So it puts out contract and says anybody who's interested in being responsible for cleaning the streets of Haringey, send in your proposal, and we'll look at all of these different proposals. Then we'll award a contract. So that's procurement. Right. That's what procurement is. Now, so our argument is that if you're in that situation, whether it's a local authority or the National Health Service, procuring hospital gowns or PPE and masks and the like, if you're in that situation, you actually have quite a lot of leverage, by which I mean, if I'm, again, that London Borough of Haringey, and I say, well, actually, commercial company A, I don't think your proposal is very good because you're not paying your workers enough. Right. So you can't compete for that contract. So company A has to then think, oh my gosh, I should be paying my workers.
So you're making sure you're keeping companies in check. Basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but the situation is within local authorities and elsewhere. They don't feel they have the power, because I've made it sound a very simple process, but it's very complicated. So the idea of this legislation would be to clean that up and to say to those commercial companies, you've got to do better on environmental abuses and human rights abuses. So we had this meeting, and it really fired me up, because everybody was saying, it's a bit of a blow that we can't make this law right now, but actually this is what we can do. So we can do this, we can work with these people. So-and-so's got a good contact within government, they can speak to them. So that's the kind of thing that sort of helps me to think, I can keep going.
But also, because the election has just happened, that means you've got another sort of 5 years to get that working. You've been sort of given more time without having to worry that there's suddenly going to be an election call that's going to sort of cut stuff off.
That's a really good point, absolutely. And it did come up last night, because we were saying, well, okay, we now, if we had the private members' bill was having to be done, by Christmas and get it all sorted out, we don't have to worry about that now. We've got a longer span of time to be more strategic and to put those plans in place.
Yeah, I kind of get it as well, because when I was thinking up the idea for this podcast, it was like in sort of February, March kind of time. And I was thinking, hang on a minute, there's going to be an election this year. What's going to happen then? And I mean, I haven't actually published anything yet, genuinely. But I'm like, hang on a minute, I've got 5 years now.
Yeah, you have. And you've got, a wealth of new MPs.
Way more female MPs. It's incredible.
I'd be interested to know what proportion, because there's, I think there's 300 new MPs across the House. Yeah. So I would reckon, a good percentage of those. And of course in Cabinet there's a lot of women.
Yeah, that's 50-50 Cabinet.
Absolutely, which is amazing. It is, I mean, I've lived a few years longer than you, so I've seen governments come and go. And I mean, there were times when you'd hardly see any female MPs. There was a time when they used to say there were more male MPs called John than there were
female
women.
MPs.
Yeah.
That's insane. It shows you how far society's come, really.
Yeah. Still a way to go.
Yes, but we're making progress.
We're making progress.
But can you share a piece of advice or wisdom that you've learned throughout your career in politics?
No, I don't have any wisdom.
You must have something.
It's funny because I sometimes, that idea of offering advice. I think what I would say, to be honest, I would say just keep at it. Because I know it's a bit of a cliche to say, if at first you don't succeed, try again. But often, like with this bill that I was talking about earlier, I can see a different way of achieving the same thing. So the important thing is then to have a very clear objective, right? Something that you sort of like, I want to work internationally on human rights, let's say, for example. So then you might think, oh, well, I know there's a job going in that field, and then you don't get that job and you sort of think, oh, well, I can't do that.
Things happen for a reason and you should keep trying again.
You keep trying because the next thing, if you keep telling everybody, I want to work overseas in human rights, and then one day somebody comes and says, hey, there's a really great opportunity for somebody to work on this committee, etc., etc., etc. So you've got to be open, I think. I would advise anybody to be open, because I get quite a few interns come, work for me, and they're
Is there a minimum age for that?
Sorry?
Is there a minimum age for that?
No. Yeah, kind of. Are you thinking of yourself? We'll sign you up, don't worry.
Oh, thank you.
We'll sort something out. It's funny because one of my former interns is in the new intake of MPs.
Nice.
Which is quite extraordinary. Wow. Yes, and he was the youngest mayor in Haringey as well. So I'm not saying that's anything due to me, because he was always very ambitious and knew what he wanted to do. But again, it is like having an idea of what it is you want to do, and then sort of focusing on that. I'm not saying that's you've got to be so focused that you don't see or do anything else, but just have that sort of thing in mind. And I've found personally that where I've sort of said, I'm really interested in what goes on in such and such a world, and then I sort of think, well, how can I get into such and such a world, because I don't know anything about it. So I'll go and read about it, etc., and then try.
Yeah, I mean, I always sort of keep trying,
Yeah, absolutely.
Because life isn't meant to be easy,
well, if it was meant to be, it's going the wrong way about it.
But going on to what you did before politics, I know you used to work as an actor. What was your favourite role?
Well, that's an interesting one, because when I was acting, it was a time where just real black stereotypes, right?
Yeah.
So sadly, the roles that were available to me were, very limited.
Yeah.
And in the end, that's why I gave up acting. But again, it's like, so that door closed, another door opened, did something else. But I guess, what was my favourite role? Oh, I think, actually, I tell you what it was. I played Shirley Bassey, but I was dressed as a fish finger.
Right. I'm going to need a bit of context. Join us after the break to hear more about Lola's fish finger foray.